listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Welcome along, everybody, to my podcast, Straight to Video. It's episode 60, and we have got something of a legend on today's show as I chat to Mr. Chip Z'Nuff from the band Enuff Z'Nuff. Now, this band holds a special place in my heart as they've kind of been part of my rock and roll adventure since I saw them supporting Poison at Nottingham's Rock City back in April 1993, and then numerous times since, from totally trying to steal guitarist Johnny Monaco's trick of wrapping his guitar cable around his neck whilst playing and trying my best to copy his cool red hair, right through to getting the chance to write the liner notes of their Suck It and See DVD during my Trash Pit days. I finally got the chance to tour with them on my first Bullet Boys tour in 2007, when truly each member of that band really took me under their wing and helped me along, which to this day means a heck of a lot, and it's still one of my favourite tours I've done. There's been endless encounters since, but hey, that's only my side of the story. Enuff Z'Nuff are a band that are beloved by thousands of people across the world and heralded as one of the greatest and most essential pop rock and power pop bands of our time. The lineup may have changed over time, but Enuff Z'Nuff is still going strong to this day with over 20 albums in their catalogue. Founding member and bassist Chip Z'Nuff now fronts the band and is as passionate about music and performing as he ever was. Chip is without doubt larger than life, everyone's big brother, and a bigger rock star than anyone in the charts right now. So I was stoked that he took the time to check in with me from his home in Blue Island, Illinois, to be part of the podcast. Now, if you're new to Enuff Z'Nuff, well, you got a lot of catching up to do, kiddo, and that's not a bad thing. If you enjoy our chat, please head on over to enuffz'nuff.com, where you can read all about the band's incredible history, and there's a ton of music and videos for you to watch and listen to, along with their new album Brainwashed Generation, which is out now on Frontiers Records. So, without further ado, please sit back and enjoy my chat with the legend that is Mr. Chip Z'Nuff.
Happy New Year, my friend.
Yeah, you too. Been a while.
Yeah, it certainly has. Enuff Z'Nuff was supposed to come over there last year. We had a little run with the Hard Rock Hell and probably a good dozen dates that we had through the UK and Scotland, and we're going to go over to Italy, and we're going to do some other countries as well. There's a good 12 or 13 city tour, and because of everything that's going on right now, it got postponed. But I think they're rescheduling dates for November.
Yeah, I think the back end of this year is going to be the earliest for anything to happen, really.
I happen to believe that as well, and it's not much better here in the United States. And just everybody's got to hang in there and stay steady to the course, and we'll all get a chance to get out there because let's face it, just doing these little shows where live streaming gigs are drive-in theaters, it's basically a bandage on a gunshot wound.
But you're keeping safe. You're doing all right.
I'm making records over here, recording. The last Enuff Z'Nuff album, Brainwashed Generation, came out in June on Frontiers. We all thought that we'd still be able to go out and tour sometime in the year, but evidently those plans have changed. And then I have my radio show, too. I'm on the Monsters of Rock on the Dash Radio Network every single 6 days a week.
What?
All year.
Yeah?
Yep.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yep. Whoever thought I'd be doing satellite radio? It's unbelievable. But it's a great show. As far as music goes, it's not about me. It's about the songs, and 20,000 songs to pick from. It's the finest in hard rock and heavy metal. So I think that keeps people held over until we can get some live concerts going on. Plus, I can pass on any information I get from AEG or Live Nations on touring that's going on. So people are up to date on what's happening in the rock world.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to speak to me, mate. It's always good to see you.
Thanks, mate.
If it's all right with you, I'm going to throw things right back to the beginning, pre-Enuff Z'Nuff, if that's all right.
Sure.
What can you tell us about Blue Island, where you're from, and you still live there, right?
Yeah, small little town. It's on the south side of Chicago.
I always thought it had like one of the best names ever for a city.
Thanks. It's a nice little town. It's got about 20,000 people that live out here. A lot of shops, antique shops, that is, a lot of restaurants.
Yeah.
No live venues. They used to have the Lyric Theater, which would have live entertainment, but they don't do that anymore. A couple of small places like Blue Island Brewery, they have rock bands that actually play there. That's a nice establishment too. A lot of rock fans, a lot of musicians out here, a lot of actors.
Yeah?
Yeah, along with some wonderful artists that, painters and people that create. So it's a good little town when it comes to artistic endeavors. People are real supportive of each other. And I've always loved it out here. And, it's a little cold. I'm not going to deny that, but it's cold over in England as well. So it is what it is, but it's a real nice, quaint little town, and I recommend anybody that comes through on a vacation through Chicago to stop through Blue Island. Tony and Mario from the Rainbow came from here. Those guys are actually homebred here in Blue Island, Illinois.
How much has it changed from when you were growing up there?
It's changed quite a bit, actually. In the old days when I was a little kid, there was one gas station. Now there's a half dozen. Big hospital out here. Just a lot of good things that are going on as far as like life moving forward. People are excited about what's ahead of us. And I keep myself busy over here at my little recording studio where I do records, and I do my radio show here too as well, because Dash in Los Angeles is closed down until further notice. So Snoop Dogg, who's got his own show, and Kylie Jenner and Be Real from Cypress Hill, they all got their own little gigs. Orianthi, I think, is on the program as well.
Nice.
They're all doing their shows out of either small studios where they live or out of their own houses.
You're rubbing shoulders with the big hitters, if that's the lineup.
Well, there's some good cats out there. I love doing the show out in Los Angeles because everything's a hop, skip, and a jump, from the Roxy, the Rainbow, the Whiskey, the Viper Room. Go see any shows you want to. There's just wonderful venues in LA, but that's closed down too. Everybody's in handcuffs right now, bro. And it's not a good accessory.
No. But you weren't always about the music, though. You were big into baseball, right?
Well, I love sports. I tried out for a bunch of teams. I went to Brother Rice High School, and afterwards, my grandfather played with the White Sox in the 30s. My father was good friends with a guy named Benny Centura, who worked with the White Sox, and I got a chance to try out for Milwaukee Brewers, Cincinnati Reds, Kansas City Royals, Chicago White Sox. I was a pitcher. A lot of fun. I just basically, I didn't have a fast enough arm when it came to throwing a curveball or a slider or a forkball. I was very proficient at that. My fastball was a little under. I think I was throwing about 80 in the mid 80s, and they were looking for guys that throw in the mid 90s, 100 mile an hour. So at the time, I didn't get the chance to move forward, but I took that template of what I did in baseball and used it toward putting together a rock and roll band. Little discipline never hurt anybody.
Gotcha. So you was playing right up until like your mid to late teens then?
Yeah, that's it. I graduated from Brother Rice High School at 17 years old. Not because I'm smart, but I was born in September. I was hanging out with a bunch of friends here in Chicago, and I decided let's move to Los Angeles. So that's what I did. I moved to LA. I drove out there. It took me about 24 hours to drive from Chicago to LA. Unbelievable. No stops or anything. Just drove straight through. And it's pretty good. I got out there Los Angeles, and I had a band called Degeneration.
No relation to the New York band of the 90s.
They pillaged our name. We were the first. And they know that I talked to the guys in the band already. They're like, oh, you were an original Degeneration. That's so cool. And we opened for Boss Skaggs and the Grateful Dead. And we played gigs with Van Halen, playing parties and stuff. From there, I'd see all the early shows. I seen Van Halen, of course, in the early days. They were fabulous, playing these little parties. And I got a chance to see Motley Crue playing at clubs as well in Los Angeles. So that was a good time for me. I was in a punk rock band, but I was listening to everything. New wave, old wave, tidal wave. You call it what you want. There was a plethora of different music that was out there. And there was only so many record companies. There was no social media. So the old-fashioned way me was you put a band together, you learn the songs, and you go out and get gigs and play for the people and get out in the streets and pass it around and, wash, rinse, repeat. And I think that's what, it was a good little template for me to move forward. That band actually, we recorded a record, never came out, although there's a few labels that are interested in putting that record out there. But I ended up coming back to Chicago with a tail between my legs and put together Enuff Z'Nuff a couple of years later with Donnie.
Was Degeneration a West Coast band which you actually drove over to join?
No, we were a Chicago band that moved to the West Coast. We had a guy named James Wolverton, who was our manager. And immediately he put us out into Las Vegas because he did a lot of real estate out there. And he was a gambler. He was a construction engineer, and he bought properties around the country. And from there, we got a guy to work with us who was he managed all these different bands. Like, it was mostly artists like Joan Worley and Peter Marshall and people on different TV shows. And that guy, he's the one that got us all the gigs. We paid him $200 a week to manage the band. Our other manager, our day-to-day guy, paid him his salary, and then we would go and we'd rehearse and we'd play all these different clubs all around Las Vegas until the singer in the band, Peter Blast, God rest his soul, he died last year. He met one of the girls from the Las Vegas Mirror. They had a big mansion out in Vegas, and we all moved in there, and we just started living there and eating LSD 25, smoking pot 24/7, and just writing songs. And once in a while, great gigs.
How old was you all at this point?
I was 17. Lived my life vicariously through all my favorite bands of the past. And man, there was some good stuff. Those wonderful bands that were playing back then. It was really a plethora of rock bands and metal bands along with punk rockers. And we all seemed to be swimming in the same ocean. And we just traveled around the country doing what we needed to do to try to move forward and get people to know who we were.
So how long had you been into music at that point?
I was into it like around well, actually, I watched Don Kirshner's rock concert, an American bandstand, of course, and Midnight Special with Wolfman Jack. And that was a template for me. They'd come on the weekends. I'd ask my mom and dad for permission if I could watch those shows. And then I'd see all these great bands playing. I go, man, I can do that. Alice Cooper and Mountain. And the following week, it'd be, bands like Queen and maybe Mott the Hoople or Led Zeppelin or Cheap Trick, whoever it would be. And there's so many great bands that were out there at the time. There's still great bands. The music is timeless. And we just looked at that and I said, man, I could do this for a living. That was it.
You saw it as a career opportunity. It wasn't like, oh, this isn't fantasy. These guys do this for a job.
Oh, yeah. I've always said that Paul McCartney invented my job. And then I would go out there and I had a wonderful little place with my parents, and we'd set up all the equipment down in the basement. We'd rehearse down there. We'd have to shut the windows because we'd be swearing during the songs. There'd be a plethora of smoke going on, but my dad knew that if I was at home, I had a better chance of being a good boy as opposed to being out in the street running around trying to find a rehearsal spot and trying to get money to pay for that. So parents were really supportive, which is great. And I recommend all parents, if your kids want to play, make sure you try to compensate and take care of them because it's nice to do everything at home, at least for the start.
Do you remember the first album or single which you thought like, right, I'm going to go out and buy that with my own money?
Yeah, it was Sweet Hitchhiker. I remember that's what it was. It was the track. Yeah. There was a couple that really tripped my trigger nearly. As early Led Zeppelin too. I love that second album. Or perhaps it might have been Queen, Keep Yourself Alive. That was another one too. There was so many songs back then, off the top of my head. I love Mott the Hoople, All the Young Dudes, which was written by David Bowie and Ian Hunter.
Was you attracted to a lot of British stuff? Because it seems like the opposite way. We're attracted to American stuff, and a lot of Americans are drawn into the English stuff.
And listen, I love the American stuff too. That's all we heard on the radio out here, and we were all big Aerosmith fans. But I always loved the stuff that was across the pond. From the Beatles to Squeeze and, like I said earlier, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and Queen. Those are the bands that really, really tripped my trigger in the early days. But the American bands were strong too. Still to this day, I love Cheap Trick. I think they're fabulous. Go see them live. Robin Zander still has wonderful pipes. No one writes songs like Rick Nielsen. He's pillaged off the Beatles catalog better than anybody. There's a lot of good bands. The newer bands too. I'm listening to the newer rock that's out there, and that's exciting as well. Greta Van Fleet and the Rival Sons and the Vintage Trouble. Dirty Honey. There's a lot of good stuff that's out there right now, bro. Once we open everything up, it'll be like the Wild West. You'll see a lot of good shows happening and a lot of great music coming out.
How much of the music from your own area was you aware of? Because there's been some amazing bands like Styx and Survivor from like Chicago, and obviously Cheap Trick from like Illinois.
Well, I love those bands there, and those guys are my good friends. And I've had JY playing in quite a few Enuff Z'Nuff albums along with Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. But I like bands that no one knows about too, like the Thumbs. They were a fabulous band here in the States. Not many people knew about them in Chicago. They were playing sold-out gigs, clubs here in the Midwest. I thought they were fabulous, along with a band called Pez Band. They were terrific as well. And then, of course, those bands went and did an offshoot of a group called Off Broadway. Cliff Johnson was the lead singer. Those are big influences back then. Those guys were, they were older than I was. I looked up to them. I really admired their strut. Those songs are great. They just never got the chance commercially to spread their wings. However, Styx and REO Speedwagon and Survivor, those are great bands. Very keyboard oriented. Mm-hmm. Had some guitars in there as well. And that's the part that I liked about them. I always like bands with guitars. Those groups always had one or two guitar players as well. And they've really, they left an indelible mark. But I always took chances with bands that were more concise with their extracurricular activity, okay? Bands that like to drink and do drugs and burn the candle at both ends. The dangerous bands are the ones that I was gravitated to.
I've heard you mention that Off-Broadway band quite a few times.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful band. They only did a couple records. They're on Atlantic. They tour around the country a little bit. They're fabulous. They used to be called the Thumbs, and the drummer from Whitesnake was in that band actually for a while, Tommy Aldridge. And then they broke up. The guitar player in the band was a guy named Pete Comita. He ended up joining Cheap Trick for a while, and when Tom Peterson left. The offshoot of the Thumbs, when they never got a deal for some reason, I was told it's because Tommy Aldridge is still under a contract with Black Oak, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a true story or not, they just never got the chance, which they were fabulous, believe me. Great songs, and there's live shows were incendiary. But then they went and put together Off Broadway, mostly the same players, and they had some success in that band, but not enough. They just never got on that tour bus and took it around the country, unfortunately. But those records are still out there. That first Off Broadway record is fabulous. It's called On. It's got a bunch of guys with light bulbs, above them. You might want to check that album out. A couple of great songs on there. There's a single out here in the United States in Chicago was a song called Full Moon. And back then, radio programmer was a guy named Jeff McCluskey. But why, to this day, I don't know why they didn't hit a home run. It could have been because of maybe the image, or just radio at that time was real finicky. It was hard to get bands in the playlist. I'm sure a lot of excuses.
Oh, there's so many elements which needed for a band just to break through.
Yeah, Tom Werman, the great producer who produced everybody. He did their second album, and it just didn't take off, and the band ended up going their separate ways.
What was the first live show you ever went to? Can you remember your first concert?
Very first live show. Man, there's quite a few of shows that really stick out. But the one that I really recall that just was fabulous was I slept overnight at Chicago Stadium with my guitar tech, Billy Fawcett, who used to work with Cheap Trick. And we bought tickets to see Queen at the stadium. It was, or at the Aragon Ballroom. It was a 4,500 seat venue. And we slept overnight there. Very, very bad neighborhood. Okay, nothing but drug dealers and prostitutes. But I like that. That's my kind of neighborhood. We slept overnight. There's about maybe a dozen people in line waiting to get tickets for the next morning. That's how you had to get tickets in the back in those days. It wasn't StubHub and Ticketmaster and stuff like that. And if they were there, they weren't selling tickets where you can get them online because there was no internet. So we stayed overnight, and I would say by 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, there was 500 people in line waiting to get those tickets, and it was $5.50 to see Queen. I think the opening act on was Bill Nelson's Red Noise. It could have been Bebop Deluxe. I know it wasn't Thin Lizzy, because I seen them later on with Thin Lizzy when they played with Thin Lizzy opened for them at the Chicago Stadium. But nothing like seeing Queen in a small venue like that. They were fabulous.
I bet.
And I remember we were smart enough to go wait in the alley where the cars were waiting. It wasn't limousines either. It was like town cars waiting for them to pick them up and take them back to the hotel. And I remember they came out, and Freddie Mercury, Brian waved to us, and Freddie Mercury gave us the peace sign. It was pretty exciting to us,
man.
Just that they acknowledged us. There was only about 20 people in the gangway there waiting for the band to come out to say hi to them. They didn't come over and shake our hands or anything, but I think that was only because they were shy and they were a little nervous. It was their first North American tour.
Where was you for the actual gig? Was you pretty up close?
Yeah, it was actually up close. Back then at the Aragon Ballroom, there was you just stood up and watched the shows. And they had a balcony that was there too, but everybody wanted to get as close to the band as they could.
How do you rate John Deacon as a bass player? I think he's one of the best.
Oh, I think John Deacon's fabulous. His name was Deacon John back then. Then he changed it to John Deacon. I thought he was fabulous. Very underrated. He didn't sing a lot. He didn't need to. He sang on the bass. Just real tasty. He had a wonderful technique. Great live, as a matter of fact. They were just, wow, what a strong band. And they were the first band to use tapes and sequencers live as well, too, which I thought was very unique because a lot of cats didn't do that back then. They were one of the first. I think they pillaged that idea from Jeff Lynne and ELO. Or just having little stuff. And I've always been a fan of bands sounding close to the album. And Queen was very good at that. And they didn't use it. They weren't lip syncing or anything, but they have different instrumentation. There's only 4 guys in the band. So any bands that are out there playing, they're trying to capture what their record sounds like, having little embellishing things going on during the show. I've always been a fan of that. Not like some of the groups I see nowadays where, it's a total lip sync and that sounds just like the record. And he's like, there's nowhere to go. I like a little bit of where bands take a chance and they show both sides of what they can do. But Queen was fabulous. They were one of the first to incorporate different elements into their live show to make it sound at least close to the record. I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of Queen to this day. Nowadays, they got Am Lambert and there's extra guys in Queen now, so I'm not so sure they're doing as much as they used to. But I remember seeing them open with Bohemian Rhapsody, and they opened with the heavy part. They started with the piano part in the beginning, and then when the band kicked in, that's when the explosions happened, the smoke machines, and that was the first song of the set. They were fantastic.
Did you go straight to the bass?
Yeah, I went straight to the bass. I learned how to play guitar as well. And I learned different instruments just a little bit to make sure I knew where I could navigate those waters. But yeah, I was a singer first, and then I went to bass guitar.
Was you particularly attracted to the bass, or was it like a necessity that the band needed a bass player?
No, I always loved the bass, and I was, like I said, Paul McCartney invented my job, but I've always loved all bass players. Big fan of Geddy Lee, You can't go wrong. I love Shelley Burke from Budgie. There's so many bass players that I can name. Of course, I go back and listen to those great cats like Stanley Clarke. You can't go wrong. Like, fabulous bass players. But I listen to everything. Bill Wyman, big influence in the early Rolling Stone days. I mean, he was fabulous. He played with a pick, but nobody's perfect. There's a lot of cats that were out there. I'm missing tons right now because I was up since until 3 o'clock in the morning recording. So my brain's a little dysfunction. I got a little brain cramp in the morning. But there was so many bass players out there that I really was a big fan of. And I think so when the time came where I had to learn, I remember I was in Los Angeles, and it was my first band, Degeneration. I was playing bass. Obviously, I had old Fender Precision. And after the band fell apart because of substance abuse, and we just had no direction. Musically, we did, but the inmates were running the asylum. It was very hard to manage the band. I ended up coming back to Chicago. I decided, I guess it's going to be my full-time job. And I answered an ad in the paper from Desi Rex from DeMalls. He was looking for a bass player, and I had to learn 62 songs in 2 days and go on a tour with him and a guy named Bill Bishop, who played with a bunch of notable cats. And I knew right there, well, that's my job forever now. It's what I'm going to be doing. And that gig really helped me learn about bass guitar because I learned a bunch of different songs from all kinds of different players. So I was able to, very diversified, learning different styles of music. And that was real important in the old days. Nowadays, I don't know how you do. I guess you look on the internet and look at tutorials and try to find out how to play. But back then, it was just about, a good ear and listen to your favorite bass players and just trying to figure it all out, slowing the records down if you had to do that. And that's what I would do. And I learned them all quickly, and that was a good start for me. Okay. Not many teachers back then.
You did this thing with Desi Rex. How long was that for?
We went on tour. We were in a bread truck, traveling around the country. I remember my first job, the very first gig I played was at a place called The Other Place. It was in Ohio. And lo and behold, the Babies came in. They were on tour with Alice Cooper. And the manager came up to the stage. He goes, "Hey, listen, my guys want to come up and play a couple of songs. Is it okay?" And this place was a 1,200-seat venue, and it was jam-packed on a Monday night. That's how great music was back then. And we said, "Yeah, you guys come on up and play." And Ricky Phillips, the bass player in the band, was late. He didn't show up there. So he said, "Hey, man, you want to play bass with us?" I go, "Sure." And they go, "Missing You" by the Stones? I go, "Yeah." And they go, "Money" by the Beatles? I go, "Yeah, absolutely." And that was my first big gig playing with heavyweights, me playing bass with the Babies. And at the other place in Ohio, I get John Wade. That's just when he cut his hair. He looked like a good-looking Johnny Rotten. Gallagher was in the band. I remember Tony Brock was the drummer who played with Rod Stewart. All these heavyweight guys, they were great. Jonathan Cain was the keyboard player from Journey.
Unreal.
So yeah, it was all these guys on stage, and that was my first real gig playing with heavyweights. And then, of course, from there, that band went about maybe a year on tour. I was traveling around the bread truck. At the end of that tour, I came back home and I decided, you know what, I'm going to put my own band together. I had a meeting with Donnie, heard the songs. I think he was 14 then or 15, and he was a fabulous singer. He sounded like Tilbrook meets Elvis Costello and John Lennon. I go, my three favorite guys right there.
What did the two of you think of each other when you first met?
Oh, he said, I seen your band. And he goes, you're my favorite. He loved me. And I go, thanks, bro. I appreciate it. He was a young kid. I was much older than he was. At the end of the meeting, I said, listen, great meeting you, buddy. Wonderful talking with you. Good luck with everything. And he says, hey, man, can you give me a ride home? And I said, sure. And on the way home, he goes, listen, I don't want to play with those old men. I want to put a band together with you. And I go, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting my own band together. He goes, I'd love to sing in it. And I said, yeah, you think you could do it? He goes, absolutely. And right from there, a week later, we were rehearsing, put together a couple of different guys like Gino Martino and B.W. Boski. And we started rehearsing this guy named Tiger Gibbs' basement by my house. His mother and father passed away, and they left him his house. He was living by himself. He was a young little 16-year-old kid. And I said, hey, can I bring my equipment down here and let my band rehearse here? And he says, absolutely, Chip. He always looked up to me, and which was real nice, especially back then. So we moved all the equipment in there and started rehearsing in this guy's basement. That's how we honed our chops.
What year was this then?
This would be 1983, 1984.
Wow. So did you kind of have any kind of blueprint when you formed? If it's like 84, how aware was you of the hard rock scene that was kind of really gaining momentum? You had bands like Rat, Dokken, Bon Jovi, obviously Van Halen.
We weren't paying attention to that. I knew about those bands earlier playing with Degeneration. Donnie and our focus of attention was writing great songs, in our opinion, and trying to, compete with the heavyweights that were out there, obviously. But as far as those bands you just mentioned, we respect those bands, but that's not what we were listening to at all. We were listening to what's over across the pond. We wanted to do something that was a little heavier. We love Beatles, but we wanted to be a little more aggressive, just distorted guitars and a little more fancy as far as, our stage image and look and dress. We also looked at all the bands like Queen and Led Zeppelin, and, we loved Aerosmith and we loved Cheap Trick. All those bands we were fans of, but we just wanted to try to create our own sound. And we weren't really trying to pillage off anybody's template. We just took all our influences that we had. And you show me a guy without influences, and I'll show you a guy who hasn't written one note. Okay, so that's what we did. We just tried to write these songs. It was trial and error. Rehearse them in the basement. If they felt like there was something that we can move forward with, we would play them. If they didn't, we would just drop them and come up with more material. Because we started off the band all original. It was no cover songs whatsoever, except for one tune, the old Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder song, Tears of a Clown. That was in our set. Otherwise, everything else was all our own material. We just kept playing and getting our chops together until one day we were at this little place called J.D. Batts. It was a bar on the south side of Chicago on Blue Island. And we were sitting at the bar with fake credit cards just looking for trim and trying to cause some trouble. And this guy came up to me and goes, yeah, so what are you guys doing? I go, we got a band. And he goes, what do you call it? I said, we're called Enuff Z'Nuff. We spell it real fun. He goes, oh, great. He goes, and what do you guys want to do? And I said, well, we're trying to get in the studio. We want to record a couple songs. And he says, well, my name's Lieutenant Bob Erft. I'm with the Blue Island Police Department. I go, hey, whatever we did, we're sorry. He says, no, I want to help you guys. I'd like to see you guys do well. And we hung out for about 20 minutes. And then he came over. He goes, hey, man, good luck with everything, you guys. I hope to see you around, and not in a bad way. And we said, oh, thanks, buddy. And he split. And about an hour later, he come back and he walked up to where I was sitting at the bar, and he slammed $500 on a table in front of me. He says, will this be enough to get you guys to record? And this is after a half-hour conversation. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, absolutely. I went and got on the payphone and called a place called Star Tracks, and it's in Orland Park. And I called this guy, and the guy picked up at 1:30 in the morning and said, hey, my name's Chip. I play in a band called Enuff Z'Nuff. We want to come in there and record. He says, when? I said, right now. And he says, the engineer says, well, I just got done tweaking up the drums and stuff. He goes, come on in.
Really?
And we went in there and recorded Catholic Girls Day by Day and No Second Time off the first Enuff Z'Nuff album, which was called 1985. In one night. And that's how everything really started. That really got everything going. And to this day, I haven't seen that Lieutenant Bob Erft. He's not a Blue Island Police Department lieutenant anymore. I don't know where he's at, where to find him, but he's the guy that's responsible for Enuff Z'Nuff. He started it all off for us. What a wonderful cat. It was actually, the good Lord was watching us, because it was a dream come true to get a break like that. And that's how it happens for a lot of bands. You work and you break your ass for years and years, and eventually you get a break, and just, put your best foot forward. And luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and we got a chance there. And hope that guy, Lieutenant Bob Erft, is still doing good. I hope he's retired and he's got good health right now, because wonderful guy right there, left an indelible mark with me. I hail him.
That is like proper paying it forward. Didn't want anything back. Drop the money. You guys go and do your thing.
That was it. Never seen him again, bro. I really haven't. I don't know where he's at. And I just hope he's doing well. And I want to thank him. And I'd like to pay him back one day.
I love that. That's amazing. Did it take long for you guys to kind of build up a name and break out of the Chicago, Illinois area?
I was always a hustler. So what I did was I went to all the clubs that my father used to take me to see all the bands play. And I talked to the owners there, and we were all underage. I wasn't, but the rest of the guys were. Actually, Gino Martina was okay. B.W. Boski and Donnie were still underage. But I talked these guys into letting us do some shows, and we would open for whoever it would be that was coming through town, whether it was a Cheap Trick or BTO, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Guess Who, whoever the band would be that were coming through town. We'd always tell them we'll open for them. We don't want any money. We just want to play.
So you actually got to open for Cheap Trick?
Yeah, I love Cheap Trick in the early days. As a matter of fact, in the very early days, I went to see Cheap Trick play at a little club called the Limelight in Chicago, and I walked right backstage, and no security or anything. Nobody said anything to me because of my look. They probably thought I was in the band. And I had a cassette tape, and I gave it to Rick Nielsen. And I talked to Robin there. He was real nice. Peterson was great. Bunny, everybody was real nice to me. No one has something there. Even the road manager at the time, just really kind guys who knew I was a musician. I said, listen, we're going to be making a record, and I'd love you to produce us. And he says, yeah, give me your stuff. And I gave him a cassette tape, and I never heard anything from him after that until later on when we got a record deal. And I remember going to Atco Records, Derek Shulman, who was the old singer from Gentle Giant, who signed Enuff Z'Nuff, and asking him, he says, was there anybody out there you guys would like to produce your record? And Donnie and I said, well, we gave a cassette tape to Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. And he says, has he called you back or contacted you? And we said, no. He said, well, forget him. You guys did the demos. You guys just do it yourself.
Wow.
That was it. We really wanted Rick to do it. We thought it would have been a great idea having Nielsen produce that first record. But now looking back in hindsight, maybe we did it the right way, because we ended up producing the record ourselves with the help of a couple of different guys. Rich Denahart, at the time he was playing with Adrian Blue and the Bears he was doing. Adrian Blue obviously played with King Crimson, all those great bands, Frank Zappa. There was a couple of different guys that actually co-engineered the record. With their help, we were able to, find a good place with those songs. And then we went and got Paul Lanny, who did Peace Sells, Who's Buying by Megadeth, to come in there and mix the record. So I think at the end of the day, we did okay, because that record did well for us. It was certified gold. I don't know if it's platinum yet, but I'm sure, it's close to it. They don't really do that stuff anymore. But with the help of those guys, really helped take it to the right direction. There was one guy that was working with us, and he ended up going over, one of the engineers ended up going over to Paisley Park Studios and working over there. Boy, sometimes you get a brain cramp and you can't remember these guys' name, but they're wonderful. These were wonderful guys who were just learning how to play and how to make records. So it was new for them as well. Rich Denahart, I, of course, remember because of all the past stuff that Rich did in the early days with Enuff Z'Nuff. He actually taught us how to plug in and play those songs and get them on tape, and about performances and how you got to play the songs well first before you do anything else. You want to get good performances, and then you can give it the bells and whistles that it would need. And that was really good for us at the time. It was a great teacher. And we did that record, by the way, over at Royal Recorders in Lake Geneva. And then from there, the balls were off. We were ready to go. And we just started traveling all over the place. But those early formidable years are very important to us. Recording over at Star Tracks in the South Side of Chicago, working our way up, playing some shows and collect a little bit of dough or just to reach an audience, and then going over to Lake Geneva. That was really the starting point for Enuff Z'Nuff. It took about 5-6 years before we actually, caused any commotion whatsoever. We were big in a small pond for a little while, but we wanted to reach the whole world. And those are things that we needed to do to move forward.
In 1986, you had the song Fingers on It, which was on the film Portrait of a Serial Killer. I mean, that's a few years before the major label released. How did that all happen, getting a placing on a film?
That was lucky. I had a friend of mine who I played with him for a while in the early carnation of Enuff Z'Nuff when it was spelled differently. His name was Steve Jones. He played in a band called Fawn. They were fabulous too. They should have been bigger. For some reason, they just, after years and years of playing the clubs and theaters, they couldn't take it to the next level. But he started doing movies and soundtracks. He was friends with John McNaughton, who was the director of that film. And so he came to me and says, hey, we're shooting a movie. Send me some of your stuff. So I sent him the record, the 1985 record with Fingers on it. And he loved it. He gave it to John. John goes, this is perfect. Let's use this for after one of the scenes with Michael Rooker when he kills somebody and comes back home. We said, that's great. Use whatever whatever you want to use. We had no idea it was a movie that was going to cause any significant action whatsoever. Once that movie came out, it didn't cause much commotion here stateside, but over in Europe, it ended up becoming a cult classic. People hailed it, and that's a hard movie to watch, okay? It's very, very scary. And when you see it, it'll shake you up a little bit, but really put together very well. Michael Rooker, terrific actor. And that was the start of his career, actually, because after that, then he started doing a bunch of bigger stuff. What a wonderful actor. And just a great opportunity for Enuff Z'Nuff. We had no idea. We just wanted to get our songs out there and have people hear our stuff. So that was the start for us. But still, even after that came out, it was years and years before we actually were discovered by any record companies. Yeah, we were playing clubs. We were opening for all the bands we could. We were doing recordings over at Royal Recorders in Lake Geneva. We were still recording in my house in Blue Island on a little 8-track Fostex with a drum machine. It was just Donnie and I was playing all the guitars and the bass. Donnie was singing, playing rhythm guitar, bounce tracks over and make sure we some harmonies on there. We finally got a break when we were in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and Skid Row was in the studio along with Tapao. Jane's Addiction was mixing Nothing Shocking. There was a bunch of different cats that were over at the studio there. And we were lucky enough to talk to Doc and Scott McGee, our manager, Bob Brigham at the time, who passed a cassette tape along to those guys. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll take a listen to it. And we were rehearsing out there. And Doc came back. He says, I got 3 cassette tapes in my car, Chip. 2 of them are your band. I said, oh, Doc, thanks. And I knew he was managing Bon Jovi at the time. I don't think he had Scorpions then or Kiss. He may have, but he had Bon Jovi, and that was significant. And he had Motley Crue as well. He goes, I got a friend of mine who signed Cinderella and Bon Jovi over at Polygram. They gave him his own imprint over at Atco Atlantic Records. I'm going to pass him on your cassette tape, see if he'd like it. I think he really would love you guys. And we were like, hey, thanks. Appreciate that, bro. And we've already sold 10 million records in our mind. Our day-to-day guys who are working with us, who own the studio, were feeding us drugs and booze and trim. We were out of control, okay? But eventually, Doc gave him the cassette tapes, and Derek Shulman, who was the president at the time of Atco Records, said, I love these guys. He sent us a facsimile, flew to Chicago, watched us at a rehearsal, a place called Dress Rehearsal with Don and Monica Graylis. They own the place. Were kind enough to let us rehearse there. And it was a debacle of a rehearsal, okay? Just tons of people in the room smoking, drinking. No one cared about anything. It was just a big rock and roll party. And we played a song. We did New Thing for him. And after we finished playing, Derek broke a string, and Donnie said over the microphone to Derek. He says, let me know if he blew the deal. I'll fire him right now. And Derek laughed. He goes, no, we're good. We played one more song for him. I think it was She Wants More. And then after the song ended, Donnie goes, you've heard enough, haven't you? And Derek goes, yeah, I certainly have. And we talked for about 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes. Derek was playing guitar. We're just talking about the old days of when he was in England playing, singing with Gentle Giant. And then he split. We shook his hand. And he split. And we thought, that's okay. We'll get a deal somewhere else. And the next day, they sent a facsimile to us for a record deal for $250,000. And that was it. I tell you, my whole life changed right there. We weren't even trying for it. It was natural and organic, and it was real. Bunch of guys, that were transparent. We were showing the real band how we actually were. And Derek loved that. And we immediately went in the studio and started recording the debut record.
I love it. So good. You're obviously like a massive, massive music fan. You say you listen to a lot of music, new bands and fresh bands. How did you embrace the alternative music of the 90s? Because whilst it was heavily associated with Seattle, there are actually a lot of musicians from that scene who have a history with Chicago, notably Smashing Pumpkins. I think Tom Morello's got connections with Chicago. And obviously Billy Corgan has even recorded with Enuff Z'Nuff.
Yeah, what about Soundgarden, Kim Thale?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Chicago guy too. But listen, I thought it was all great. A lot of guys that were caught up in the same genre as us, rock or glitter rock, metal, whatever you want to call it. We were all those. Okay, we were alternative before our fucking alternative came out, my opinion. But when those bands came out, I was a big fan. I liked Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and Mudhoney and Nirvana. They were just great bands. How can you not love that stuff where a lot of our contemporaries were giving them the finger because they didn't have the look. They weren't wearing makeup and lipstick. They weren't dressing up the part. But, when you put a record on a turntable or a CD in the deck, you don't see smoke machines and chicks shaking their asses and stuff. You just hear the music. Those are good bands. I have always embraced them. But I got to be honest with you, when that whole Seattle thing came out and that alternative stuff, a lot of people took an ass whipping. A lot of bands went away, and maybe rightly so. They had their run. For the bands that were strong and didn't want to give up like us, God bless us. We kept moving forward. I knew there was a change of the guard back in 1990 when I was in New York and I was at a club drinking we were kicking ass at the time. The band was on fire, Fly, New Thing were both hits. And I went to this club when I was hanging out with a couple of rock stars, and the girls behind the bar go, you guys, I heard of you cats. Have you heard this band called the Smashing Pumpkins? So we go, yeah, they're from Chicago. What about them? Oh, they're great. They're going to be huge. And we go, okay. And they weren't big then yet. They were just starting to come out. But then Virgin, made a big push on them. And of course, those singles came out. They're absolutely fabulous. And you couldn't stop that choo-choo train, no doubt about it. And they're just quirky enough to people for them to pay attention to it. But I was into bands that were under the radars at that time too. So it was nice to see the Pumpkins getting a chance. There's another band called Material Issue. They should have got a chance as well. They had a bunch of singles out there, but it was a short run for them. I don't know why, because that band had just as much talent, I thought. They're 3-piece group, no tapes, nobody backstage. Those guys actually singing and playing their asses off, and they were fabulous. And as a matter of fact, there's a documentary that's out right now, or it's coming out, on Material Issue. That's a band everybody should pay attention to. But for every band that we talk about, there was 100 of them that should have been successful, and they just didn't get a break. That's the way the music business runs. You get that one little chance and you take it, and if you don't, you might not get another chance again. And that's why Enuff Z'Nuff never gave up. We've always followed our influences and what we stood for as a rock band, which is 24/7, 365 days a year. That's what we do for a living. It wasn't a part-time gig for us.
How did you cross paths with Billy Corgan?
Yes, I've seen Billy Corgan plenty of times, most notably at a place called the Metro, Joe Shanahan's place, a wonderful guy who has a beautiful venue. All the big bands that play there. I've seen everybody from the Cramps there to Ramones. It doesn't matter who you were. We opened for Skid Row there. I mean, it's unbelievable the stuff that I would see there. Gary Moore, just artists that you would never think that would play, that would touch the stage over at the Metro. It was just a fabulous place. And I seen him, I go, man, this guy's got something, I really admire his strut. Just the way he carries himself with that Zero shirt on and playing guitar and distorted guitars, but pop songs on 20, I went to the Metro one night. We were doing a record. We were doing a Paraphernalia record, and it was a dark time. The Black Cloud was following Enuff Z'Nuff. It was really tough times for us. And I eventually ran into him walking into the venue. I said, hey, Billy, I'm Chip. You guys, hey, how you doing, buddy? I love your Strength record. I go, thanks. I appreciate that. I go, we're recording over at Chicago Recording Company, and I got Cheap Trick, Rick Nielsen coming down, and JY from Styx. And I was wondering if you'd be so kind to play on a song. We covered Everything Works If You Let It by Cheap Trick, and I thought maybe that'd be something you might be interested in doing with us. He says, Chip, he goes, that's one of my favorite Cheap Trick songs. He goes, when are you recording? I said, on Sunday. He goes, all right, I'll come out. And he showed up there.
Wow.
And he showed up with his assistant, Tommy Lipnick. I call him Tommy $100 Lipnick because he always carried $100 bills with him. And he had his own studio as well. He's a very good friend of ours at the time. And Billy walked in. He goes, hey, where's the stack of Mesa Boogies? And I said, I didn't know that's what you wanted, buddy. But we had a couple of small boogie amplifiers in there. And all he had was his guitar and a small little silver pedal. And he goes, this will do. And he plugged in and goes, hey, Chip, show me the riff. And I knew he knew the song. So I grabbed his guitar and I played Everything Works If You Let It, just the riff. Just a little riff. It's basically Rush. That's what it sounds like to me. And he goes, okay, I got it. In 1 or 2 takes, he had the whole song down. It was great. And then I said, I got another song called Got No Place to Go. Would you listen to this one? He goes, yeah, play it for me. And he jammed on it just a little bit in the beginning. Wow, wow, no, 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 wow, wow, no, no, no. He went through like a verse. That's it. And he goes, I'm done. And I go, cool, no problem. I go, man, Billy, I appreciate you coming down. I owe you anything? He goes, no, Chip, not at all. And he grabbed a couple $100 off Tommy Lipnick and they split. And then I went into Pro Tools and just took the parts on that he played on that track and I put it through the whole song. So I got him on 2 songs. It was great.
Yes.
And he sounded great. And Don, he goes, oh, you're wrecking the song. That's what I go, bro, just relax. Take it easy. Not wrecking anything. It's Billy Corgan. And then we went through and we put it all together. And I thought he did a fabulous job. And he only was down there for an hour with us. But I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, Chris Shepard was the engineer. He did a lot of stuff in the early days with Smashing Pumpkins and with Cheap Trick. So, it was nice to all be able to watch Billy in action, how quick he is and what an astute musician he is. And a super smart cat, too. One of the smartest musicians I know. And more than anything, kind beyond belief because he didn't have to come down and play with Enuff Z'Nuff, but he admired us enough that he came down and played. Now, on that record, it was called Paraphernalia. And it had, like I said earlier, I had Rick Nielsen and JY from Styx. So I went and got 3 big heavyweights from Chicago to play on the record, hoping that one thing and we get a chance to play with our friends that we admire. And two, perhaps it'll elevate our perception as a band. But I remember Spin Magazine did a review on the record and it said, another fabulous record by Enuff Z'Nuff, but will this be enough to lift the black cloud that follows them? I said, God damn, that journalist is smart. He's right. And we found ourselves in debt on that record. We probably owed the studio about $25K, but we ended up getting a deal with Japan, and then we did something in the United States. Our manager, Herbie Herbert, and Bob Brigham at the time were able to procure deals for us. So it kept us alive for a little while longer. It was basically the old bandage on a gunshot wound, but some great moments right there. And I'm glad that I can listen back to those records and hear those cats' performances because, man, those are great musicians right there. I remember when Nielsen walked into the studio there, he walked in, it was early afternoon. There was a big quarter pound of pot sitting on the table right by the big SSL console. And Nielsen walks in. I go, hey, Rick, how you doing? And he goes, that's funny. Marijuana, Enuff Z'Nuff session. And then he comes in and we hug, of course, because he's like a big brother to me. And he got his Les Paul with him. And then Donnie walks into the studio and he goes, hey, man, what are you doing here? And Nielsen goes, he's so quick, top of his toes every time. He goes, I was just getting ready to ask you the same thing. And Donnie just turned around and ran out of the studio. He was embarrassed. And then Nielsen, he was only going to play on one song. He ended up playing on 3 tracks, which I thought was very kind of him. Didn't want any money, wouldn't take a penny from us. He knew we were hemorrhaging dough. We had no money. He didn't care. He just wanted to come down and play with Enuff Z'Nuff. That's a true brother right there. And then JY came down there and he played on a couple songs as well and wouldn't take any money. I gave him $300 to put toward his favorite charity. But all these guys played on the arm. They just did it because they're for the love of the music, because they were my friends. And to this day, we're all still good friends. I don't see Billy Corrigan very often, but if he's got any charity events or anything going on, I always donate to that. And JY, I see him when he plays through town. Last time I seen him was in Indiana a couple of years ago, and they were absolutely fabulous. Styx was just on fire, and nobody backstage, no chicks, no drugs, no alcohol, just me and JY hanging out with my buddy, just taking pictures and talking. He was just so kind, such a great big brother. And of course, our new record's called Brainwash Generation, and I had Dax Nielsen from Cheap Trick, who took Bunny's place. He played drums on half the record. So my friendship with those cats, it goes a long way, and it really means a lot because those guys have been very kind to me, and I love their contribution to music.
Has there been any other musicians who have come up to you during your career who have surprised you as being a fan?
Well, I don't know about a fan, but I remember we were playing Texas, and my manager, Bob Brigham, came up to us. He goes, hey, Johnny Rotten's here right now. We were playing this pretty big venue. It's almost like a horse stable or something. I said, oh, cool. I wanted to say hi to him. And then he goes, after the show, I'll try to drag him back here. I go, great. And after the first song, we had to stop because there was a huge fight at the bar. Johnny Rotten and his entourage got in a fight with a bunch of guys, and they got thrown out of the venue. So that was a bummer right there. I really wanted to get a chance to shake his hand, tell him how much I admire the Sex Pistols and love PIL. But, guys that have come to our shows that have seen us, there's so many of them, Rob. Off the top of my head, I can't really tell you. I had Mike Portnoy, who happens to be my cousin now because my wife's related to him. He played drums on Brainwash Generation on one of the tracks called It's All in Vain. That was nice. I've had quite a few musicians that have come down and play with Enuff Z'Nuff. But as far as, guys that come out to our shows, tons of them. That's all I can tell you. You name the bands, they've been out there. Hung out Roger Metal Taylor. You can't go wrong there. When I was playing with Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses, all the heavyweights would come out and see us all the time. And it was big. And I always had a wonderful time, whether it was hanging out with George Lynch or, guys in Rat or Faster Pussycat or LA Guns. It's just, it's a big potpourri of great musicians, and we all respect what each other does. The average life expectancy, I've mentioned millions of times, is 3 to 5 years. To see all these guys still out there playing music is testimony to the great talents that they carry and the luck that has been provided to them through the years.
What kind of album or band still provides inspiration to you, which is like a go-to? If you had to go and drop a vinyl on the vinyl player now, who would you go to?
Too many to mention, but just to pick one band, of course, I'm going to go with Beatles, because you can look at that, you can interpret it as many ways as you want to. I got some good surprises for the Enuff Z'Nuff fans that has to do with the Beatles real soon. I'll be letting everybody know about that. Did some real nice stuff. I don't want to talk about it too soon, but people will be pleasantly surprised when they hear the next thing that I have coming out.
How much down the Beatles wormhole have you gone when you've been to the UK?
Everything. I've grabbed it all. I grab all my memorabilia from there. My old manager, Bob Brigham, and his partner, Ron Prozel, who's one of my best friends in the world. I buy gifts for those guys, and I bring them back here to the States. They love it. Anything Beatles, I've always been interested in. But listen, I love Queen. I love Led Zeppelin. The list goes on and on and on. on. My go-to right now is if I can only pick one band, obviously I'm going to go across the pond. But, I'm just doing what I do right now. I got my radio station, the Monster Rock, which is on the Dash Radio Network. And that's my focus of attention when I'm not playing music, is playing music of other bands that I admire and love and who have been a big part of my fabric. At the end of the day, I'm not a guy who's just looking to records to pillage stuff. I've already done that through the last 20 albums that Enuff Z'Nuff has put out, okay? I'm trying to find stuff that makes me satisfied right now. And I think I'm still coming up with some pretty cool ideas and some wonderful songs. There's certainly plenty of fodder and subject matter to write about in the world right now. And for anybody that's out there writing songs, listen to the stuff that trips your trigger. Find stuff that really moves you, and that's what you write about. And that's the best way to go. And it just so happens that I write about everyday experiences that I went through, and perhaps the audience has as well. So you can't go wrong right there. At the end of the day, it's all about trying to come up with the songs, trying to record them in the best manner possible. And I just want to make great records because that's my legacy at the end of the day. And I hope people get a chance to take a little time out of their day to listen to the stuff that Enuff Z'Nuff has recorded and produced. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. There's a few things in there that I really believe will put a smile on your face.
Love it, man. Love it. Chip, I'm going to let you go, but it's been amazing to see you and talk to you again.
Rob, it's always good to see. One of my favorite memories quickly is you and I, Donington Download, Enuff Z'Nuff is playing there. Rage Against the Machine is there. Aerosmith, Stone Temple Pilots, Lamb of God, Megadeth are all playing on the first stage. Five Finger Death Punch, I remember they got thrown off the stage because they were inciting a riot. But you and I were on the second stage. You were my bass tech, Michael Monroe, Y&T, just a wonderful event. 15, 20,000 people out there. We opened with New Thing, and it was one of the first shows I ever played where my bass stayed in tune, the old 1963 Precision. And I've always loved you. I love touring with you. You're a great guy. I love your band. You had that one band, Teenage Casket Company, fabulous name for a band. I consider you a great friend and an ally. I can't wait to come back to your country again. And thanks so much for talking to me. I wish you and your family nothing but the best through 2021. I hail you. Thanks, mate. Peace.
Always wonderful to catch up with Chip Z'Nuff, and I look forward to when he and the band can get back to doing what they love and heading out on tour. As mentioned, the new Enuff Z'Nuff album Brainwash Generation is out now on Frontiers Records, and for all up-to-date news and events, check out enuffznuff.com for all the info. And Chip is also pretty active on Twitter, where you can find him at Chip Z'Nuff. Thanks as always to listening to the Straight to Video podcast. Lots of stuff in the pipeline, including the launch of the new website in a couple of weeks, and hopefully some new cool merch to coincide with that. But in the meantime, please keep sharing and spreading the word, as that is what really helps grow the show. And if you're listening for the first time, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, I've been your host, Rob Lane. Thanks ever so much for listening.